The Cincinnati Reds need to focus on pitching at this year's trade deadline.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Steven Offenbaker. His name's Jeff Carr. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We love baseball. We love the Reds. We've been doing it for a combined 14 seasons, and we love talking Reds baseball with you. On today's show, the Reds could add the best college hitter in the draft if it unfolds like a recent mock draft from Baseball America. We'll discuss how that prospect could change the organization a little bit later in the show. The Reds have been mentioned in a trade idea by ESPN that is truly a no good, horrible, terrible, awful, bad idea. We're going to tell you why. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We will begin today by setting the priorities for this trade deadline, though, for the Reds, because it's clear they need to add. Yesterday showed us they definitely need to add. That's coming up on today's episode that is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers right now can get $150 in bonus bets back if your first $5 bet wins. All right, Jeff, you know what didn't win? That was the Reds yesterday, in a game they should have won, in a game they needed to win, in a game they almost had to win, in a game that we said was part of the plan for them to win. They, of course, one tweet during the game, Jeff, the Reds were always going to red in this situation, weren't they? And that's exactly what happened.
That was a rough game. I mean, the Reds needed 2 hits in the 9th inning just to have more hits than they had errors. And I think that game really showed to me, not necessarily, I mean, it's easy to say, well, they scored 1 run, they got 3 hits, they need hitting, but it felt like that was a team that they should be able to shut down their lineup with their bullpen and with their starting pitching. And Brady Singer was okay. He threw what felt like way too many pitches. He was not very pitch efficient in that start. But whenever the Reds went to the bullpen, it was a mixed bag, man. They did not get the consistent performance that I thought they would get from the guys that they called upon. And I think it's just because when you look at this pitching staff, the starting pitching is pretty solid, but the depth of it stands on the edge of the knife. And then when you get to the bullpen, you've got 2 guys that you trust. You've got 3 guys that you hope for, and then the rest of them, you just flip a coin as to whether they're going to be useful for you or not. And I think because of that, they really need to prioritize pitching when it comes to adding at this trade deadline. Now, I know that's not like the Reds are the only team that's going to be looking for pitching here. Everybody is always looking for pitching. But I think if you were to set the priority and say, all right, you can go get pitching or you can go get hitting, and ideally they get both, but I think you need to focus your efforts on adding really good quality pitching and maybe adding depth when it comes to the lineup.
Yeah, I don't think that you are wrong. Notice I just can't bring myself to say that you're right, but you're not wrong, Jeff. The idea is that pitching is going to keep them in games, and when this group of position players hits, they can score runs in bunches. So you have to keep the other team held. We talked about this way back at the beginning of the season. No more than 3 runs a game, the Reds are going to win a lot of games just based on what this lineup can do. So the bullpen needs to be bolstered. It's been asked to do a lot. We're going to get to a second, the news on the starting rotation that means this bullpen is going to pitch more innings. And if that's going to be the load they're going to carry the rest of the way through this season, there's arms in that bullpen right now that are not going to hold up to that type of usage. They have to go out and strengthen this bullpen. They have to go out and get another true back end, group A-level reliever to put into this bullpen. And with the next point here on the list, Jeff, you may need to talk about going and getting a journeyman starter.
Yeah, because we got some bad news on Hunter Greene. He was pushed back. He was supposed to start in Louisville, actually, I believe today, but that start was pushed back indefinitely because he felt tightness again in the same spot where he initially felt tightness in his groin. So whatever it is, and he has gotten what seems like 15 different opinions, and he got another MRI on the tightness whenever it took place yesterday as well. but he's gotten all of these different opinions trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And every single opinion has had the same result in that it is a low grade strain, but it just seems to continue to nag and to stay there, and it's not going away for him. So it's a really annoying situation, but I think we're pushing his time even further back. We probably won't see him till August. And even then, I want them to be super careful with this, because this is one of those easy, soft tissue injuries that the moment he thinks it's good and the moment that they put him out there and he pushes it just a little bit too far, it's going to get way worse. And I don't want that to happen.
Right. And I suspect the problem here is that they let him to continue to pitch when he had the initial injuries, which is the story of the Reds training staff's lives, right? That's what they do. And then, oh, that was a bad injury. Oh, our bad. Oh, that's a problem now. That seems to be how they're handling medical stuff in Cincinnati right now. I don't know. You've heard me rant on that. I'm not going to go down that road, but for the people that are now going, well, it's okay, Chase Burns. No, it's not okay because here's the deal. Chase Burns is in his first professional season as a pitcher. He has a pitch cap, an innings cap. He is going to run out of bullets. He's going to run out of ammunition, and the Reds are going to need another starter. Now, is that starter Chase Petty? Clearly, we've established that it's not. Is that starter going to be Wade Miley? The ghost of Wade Miley? I don't know. My suspicion is probably not. Is that pitcher going to be Rhett Lauder? Maybe in the regular season, but he's not going to be postseason eligible by the time he gets back. So you look at these things, they're going to have to go get an arm, Jeff, or you have to consider the idea of Graham Ashcraft coming out of the bullpen and you bring in extra relievers. Somebody's going to have to eat innings, Jeff, and it's just not looking great. You know, there's a lot of young talent in the system that's just not ready.
Yeah, on that postseason eligibility thing for Rhett Lauder, he has to be on the roster before September 1st, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's looking tough.
It's in question. It's going to look tough.
Right. The most recent update on him, and this was back on June 25th, there was a tweet from WLWT's Charlie Clifford. He said that Rhett Lauder got another MRI on the strained oblique, the thing that he injured in his most recent rehab start back in May. And there was still swelling back on June 25th. So that means, and then look, Charlie Clifford didn't say this in his tweet, and I've not seen anybody write this, but it's pretty easy to infer from the information that we have that there ain't no timeline right now on Rhett Lauder coming back. So we can hope for late August, early September. But
let's break that down, Jeff.
Yeah.
He's going to be coming to a brand new, fresh, like showing up to Goodyear in February, spring training. We know that's 6 weeks to get a pitcher ready from that point. So if he doesn't start
tomorrow,
if he doesn't start by next week, hitting September 1st is going to be pretty impossible. So you really have to look at this through a lens of you're going to have to fill a rotation spot with either something you got or something you go and get. And then if you use something you got, you're going to have to supplement that by going and getting something else. It's not rocket science. And the Reds front office has to be looking at it this way, has to be looking at it through this lens, because they're going to absolutely decimate this bullpen if they don't make some smart decisions with these pitchers over the next several weeks.
And the only other guy that's on the injured list right now that's close is Carson Spires. Now, the good news is on him, his rehab was transferred to Louisville starting today. So hopefully he will continue to progress in a way that gets him back. And that would be the way that you would send down Chase Burns to AAA, and maybe they can manage his inning load a little bit more. And there's a possibility they could come up with a plan for the postseason. But the thing about this is getting Hunter Greene healthy and adding pitching, whether it be bullpen, whether it be a fresh arm in the bullpen, a really, really good dude. My ideal scenario, Steve, is somebody that they go get, and we'll talk about specific names later on this week, but somebody that they would go get that would actually move Emilio Pagan down a peg, would move Tony Santillan down a peg, and that would be our closer. That would be our bullpen ace. I don't know what that would look like, and that might be expensive, but I think that would be the ideal trade deadline scenario for this team. And then if they could go get some starting pitching help as well, because it seems like, and then like you mentioned, Wade Miley, I mean, the most recent thing that we've heard on Wade Miley was he is considering his options. And that's not really something that you hear from somebody. And then you say, oh yeah, by the way, that means he's coming back in a few days. Like, that's not what happens after you hear considering his options. So I know that there are a list, and I've written down a list of AAA pitchers who have both played in the majors and who have not played in the majors, but it's clear from the names available, the Reds need to go trade for some pitching help.
Yeah, that was a little hot takey. Did you mean that to be so hot takey? We're going and getting a 1A closer. I love that.
I want it. That has become my goal. And I've talked about this with a few people now of like, okay, if you could pick one or the other, which ideally the Reds go get both pitching and hitting, but if you could pick one or the other, what do the Reds need the most? And I think it's a top of the line closer do. Because don't get me wrong, I like Emilio Pagan, but I think if you're looking at the Reds bullpen from a playoff lens, you would rather have Emilio Pagan setting up the dude who's going to come in and get that save.
Yeah, Pagan does not strike fear in the hearts of opposing hitters. That's really what you want in your closer.
So they need those pitching reinforcements, and they need to go make a trade. Well, I've seen, though, a recent trade not involving pitching, but involving a hitter that the Reds could go get, and an idea about the Reds making this trade that was put out there by ESPN that is laughably bad for multiple reasons that we will cover next. Baseball's taking center stage, and there's no better way for you to make a couple of bucks on your baseball knowledge every single day than to go over to FanDuel.com. Plus, if you're a new user, you can place a $5 bet, and if it wins, you get $150 in bonus bets. Those are some crazy odds, almost as crazy as the odds that FanDuel has on the Reds to make the playoffs. A yes bet on the Reds to make the playoffs, the odds on that are at plus 470. I think I'm still putting a few on that. I got a good feeling about the Reds' ability to make the playoffs this season. And if you do too, head on over to FanDuel.com and put a couple of bucks on that yes bet at plus 470. And if you place a bet on like who's going to hit a home run tonight or who's going to get a hit, some RBIs, something like that, $5 will get you $150 if it's your first winning $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel.com. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Reds podcast. That way you don't miss anything that we've got coming for you all season long, making us part of your everyday routine because we are talking Reds every single day right here. And that includes the Reds postcast with Tim Daniel that is live after the final out of every game. All right, Steve, ESPN, and specifically Dave Schoenfield, a baseball writer for ESPN, said that the Reds and Twins should get together and make a trade. And my goodness, it is horrible. Like, I think it's probably a scenario where Dave Schoenfield was like, all right, the Reds, and they need outfield help, and maybe the Twins are sellers, and, well, these are some of the top 10 prospects from the Reds organization that they could offer up in a trade. And he even used the words in this article. He said that the Reds could make a Godfather type offer for Byron Buxton. And sure, this is the top offer that anybody probably would make for Byron Buxton because it just seems ridiculous.
Yeah, I try to bear in mind that these people write to drive clicks. They write to check a box. And I have to think that that's just the sole purpose of this article, because when you look at what this deal entails, when you look at those names, Jeff, if that's the market, then maybe they don't need to be buyers in Cincinnati because that's just crazy talk. It's crazy talk.
I think that, and so for the trade, for anybody that did not see this trade proposal, the proposal is that the Reds get Byron Buxton, and then the Twins would get Rhett Lauder, Chase Petty, and Sal Stewart. Yeah, all three of them. Not one of them, not two of them, all three of Rhett Lauder, Chase Petty, and Sal Stewart. And if you're unfamiliar with those, well, one of them we are expecting to come back hopefully at some point and being part of the Major League rotation. Chase Petty should be competing for a rotation spot next year, and Sal Stewart could very likely be vying for a Major League spot at the end of next season, at least get a cup of coffee next season, and definitely be part of the team in 2027. Look, I'm not saying that the Reds can't make a trade like this, but it definitely cannot be for Byron Buxton. Byron Buxton is a talented player, but that is not the guy that you give up this type of trade package for.
No, you look at Buxton, his career average per season is 5.4 in WAR, which is good. His average slash lines 247, 307, 482. This season alone, he's got 20 home runs, 53 RBIs, an OPS plus of 138. Oh, great. But let me tell you about games played, Jeffrey. He has an 11-year big league career. And in those 11 years, that is not a small sample size. That is a tremendous sample size. In those 11 years, he has played more than 100 games 2 times. Once was last year, 102 games. Once was way back in 2017, 140 games. That's the only time he has sniffed 100 games played in a season. He's oft injured, oft unavailable, and that does not help this Reds team that cannot fill in when he's out after giving up the haul make the postseason. This is just a bad idea. It's a bad fit. It doesn't work. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, there are those that are worried about if the Reds would mortgage their future, quote unquote, air quotes there, for certain trades. That's what this trade is. And if you're gonna put your future on mortgage, you better get somebody that's more available. And I get it. Byron Buxton has a great bat. He's really fast. He has a great glove. But availability is the best ability. And if you're not on the field, he's never played more than 140 games in a season. Never. And he's only played, like you said, more than 100 games twice in a season, which means if you're getting him, how long are you getting him for? I know that he has multiple years of team control based on the contract that he currently has. And that's probably a reason why the Twins just hold on to him anyway. But this is a gross overpay that I think even Jim Bowden would be like, I don't know, man. That seems a little expensive. I think I might not do that deal. That just, it's too much for me. And so, just to give you a comparison, because it seems easy from a Reds perspective to look at this and say, oh, this is too much. When the San Diego Padres traded with the Washington Nationals to get Juan Soto, they sent their top infield prospect in C.J. Abrams, their top outfield prospect in James Wood, one of their top outfield prospects in Robert Hassel, and their top pitching prospect in Mackenzie Gore, as well as a middle pitching prospect in Harlan Susana. All of that. So that's 5 guys for one player that they only had for a rental. That's far too much. That's only 2 more players than what the Reds would be offering for a guy in Byron Buxton that has never played a full season. I am absolutely out on this deal. 100%.
No. And I think both of us are there. I agree with you. But I do want to be clear. This is not because Jeff and I want to be prospect huggers. This is not because Jeff and I want to be prospect hoarders. I will trade everybody not named Chase Burns and Rhett Lauder right now. Everybody else if in the right deal. Correct. The right deal is the key part of this because you don't get that capital back if it doesn't work out. So you have to be smart about it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can ask the Minnesota Twins in the Tyler Mahle deal. It was a deal that didn't work, and the Reds scored big in that trade. But for me, Edwin Arroyo is not untradeable. Sal Stewart is not untradeable. You go down. Duno's not untradeable. There is nobody in this system outside of those 2 pitchers that give me any pause at all if you're getting something back that helps the Reds make the postseason right now. If it's a bona fide deal that helps this team be better, that puts them in a better position to compete and win, good, because I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of games like yesterday. So go make the deals. Go trade the prospects. I don't care about that. But you can't make a deal like this to say you made a deal like this and get a guy back that may or may not play 20 games for you after he gets here. There has to be a reliable history of contribution over, the dog days of summer, a guy that's going to be healthy, a guy that's going to give you the thing you're trying to acquire. And I just don't see that this deal is that. I hope that Craw is burning up phone lines to go out and find that deal because it needs to happen.
Yeah. Cause what's that? That's 11 years, 162 games a season. So that's 1,620. So like 1,780 something. And he has 845 games played. So literally half the games that he could have played. So that's saying you're acquiring a guy that plays 5 out of 10 games. That's at best a platoon guy. And I've seen some other platoon guys that the Reds could go get that they would not have to trade this kind of a trade package for. This is the kind of trade package that if the Reds were to go get like an MVP candidate, okay. Byron Buxton's not an MVP candidate. So I really look at this and I say that, you know what, there are deals that I would consider these types of players in. I am not of the mindset that the Reds should stand pat. They need to add, but they need to add smartly, because it's clear that Nick Krall is not going to get the type of money needed to compete in the free agency market. So he has got to use what he has to be competitive in the trade market and be smart in the trade market. We haven't really seen him go, all out when it comes to adding and buying. So how does that look like? This is going to be a big year for that, because the Reds cannot stand pat here, but this is not the trade that they need to be making.
It is definitely going to be interesting to watch that play out, Jeff. And there is the wild card factor of what are the Castellinis going to let him do. Well, the time is now. Now we're near the deadline, brother. So we're going to see how this plays out here pretty quick. But here's something I know. The Reds are going to be adding, and they're going to be adding through the draft. And Baseball America has an opinion on who that player might be, and we're going to talk about that coming up next. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a burst pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? No, you called the next one. That's why having a reliable business line is so important. And that's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. Do you have to juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Well, Open Phone solved that problem. They're going to allow you to keep your things separate on one device and get the calls when you need to get the calls. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. Open Phone is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have an existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. If you can't watch us on YouTube, you can listen to us on your favorite podcasting app. We're pretty much on all of them. And if you really find one you need us to be on and we're not on, hit that guy up over there. Jeff can make it happen for you. We're on pretty much everything, though. Also, make sure you check out Locked On MLB Game Night. They watch every game, so you don't have to. It's available in the Locked On MLB feed. Make sure you go check that out today as well. All right, Jeff. Baseball America's recent mock draft shows a really, really good hitter falling to the Reds. In fact, it shows a hitter that's ranked as the #1 hitter coming out of college baseball being available and being drafted by your Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, we talked a couple of days ago about Ike Irish and how cool it would be if the Reds were able to land him in this most recent mock. And this was like a staff mock that the writers from Baseball America got together and they did. Jeff Pontes picked for the Reds at number 9, and Aiva Arquette, who is a shortstop prospect out of Oregon State. He's ranked as the best college bat, fell to the Reds at number 9. This would be fantastic because we are talking about a guy that is a consensus top college bat. This isn't like Baseball America thinks it. This isn't like one other website thinks it and nobody else does. Everybody's coming together and saying, yeah, this is the dude. And it's pretty exciting to see if he were to fall to number 9.
Little inside baseball for the Locked On Everydayers, because I know you guys love that around here. You know how I am with names. The pronunciation guide, Jeff put it in the rundown. He put in the rundown for me how to say these names today, you guys. He's trying to help me out. Listen, Arquette is a 6'5", 220-pound shortstop from Oregon State. He's Baseball America's number 5 prospect in this draft. So you get number 5 at number 9. That feels like value, Jeff. That feels like you're getting a guy that's a little bit valuable for this team. Scouts say easy right-handed swing, good raw power. Think oh my goodness, the outfielder we just sent down that hits for a lot of power that can't hit the ball.
Rhys Hines.
Rhys Hines. Think Rhys Hines type power. This guy's got a big bopping bat. I know I've made the jokes about shortstop and are they ever going to draft either something besides a pitcher or a shortstop? Shortstops are always the best athletes. So they're getting a developed athlete here. College prospects give me pause, especially when you're going the position player route. It takes what feels like a decade for them to become ready. This is a guy that's played in college. He's much more developed, much more refined. His swing is much more dialed in. I would not have a problem with this pick, Jeff.
Yeah, this would be a really good one. And I think you meant high school prospects take longer to develop. You said college, a little bit.
Oh, did I? Yeah,
yeah.
Other way around.
Anyway,
you can't have it all, guys. I either get the names right or I get the level that they're playing at wrong. You don't get it all from me.
One of the two. But I will say too, like you compare the swing and the power, like it sounds like the type of thing we talk about with Rhys Hines, but he has good plate discipline as well. I mean, he only struck out 17% of the time last year, and he increased his walk rate by about 5% up to 12% last year. So we're only talking about a small gap between how many strikeouts and how many walks the guy had all season long. And as far as like his frame and his position right now, 6'5", 220 doesn't sound like a shortstop, but they even say that based on his athleticism and his understanding his instincts in the field, he could stick at shortstop if you needed him to. Quite frankly, profiles pretty well as a third baseman, though, too, because he has a good arm. So I think that this would be a good pick for the Reds and that they could kind of do one or the other. And they would have him for a shortstop, but they would also have him as a potential third base prospect as well. The thing that I love the most, though, Steve, and this was more of a statistic thing, and it's hard to translate statistics, especially, Oregon State, he's not an SEC player, but regardless, he slugged .654 all last season for Oregon State, and he hit 19 home runs to boot. He's the kind of guy that I think immediately boosts the entire profile of the Reds minor leagues and the future. And he's probably a guy that, think Matt McClain and how quickly he moved through the Reds system. I think Aiva Arquette could easily move that quickly through the Reds system.
I mentioned that, they have him as a top 5 prospect, and you look at the trend in baseball. I think it's becoming much more acceptable to reach for a little bit more of a certain thing, a little bit more of a sure thing. And while you're never going to get a sure thing in an MLB draft, going college over high school, especially from the position players, like I was saying incorrectly a few minutes ago, there's a little bit more control over drafting a college hitter. A little bit more about what you're going to get. A higher floor, still has the ceiling. So, these hitters might be gone by the time the Reds pick at number 9, because, there's a shot that Irish will be gone. There's a shot that Arquette is going to be gone. Those things can happen. But if either one of those guys fall to the Reds, Arquette or Irish, I would not have a problem with the Reds drafting them. Just the marketability alone from Irish being drafted by this team. Can you imagine if he makes the big leagues? We could rename the Budweiser bow tie. We could name that the Irish pub. You can get your shepherd's pie and your Guinness stew out there with it's definitely a sponsorship deal with Guinness coming in, right? Like, Jeff, we would never leave the ballpark. We would never leave the ballpark.
They never get rid of us. No, I'm with you. And I think that, like, I'm going to give a little bit more of a well thought out opinion as to who I think the Reds should end up taking. But we have been on record as saying that we are an Ike Irish podcast all the way. And I think part of that is I just don't think Aiva Arquette's actually going to be there. There's something to the number of mock drafts that Baseball America, ESPN, everybody
if they're
does.
Both there, if for some miracle they're both there at 9. I think probably Arquette. I think Arquette over Irish, right? And then that's what I think too.
If they are both there, I'm taking Arquette just because he's a little bit more of an athlete. It seems like Ike Irish probably moves to the outfield. He is listed as a catcher with some outfield possibilities, but I think he's probably moving to the outfield regardless. So I think that Arquette, you could keep things open a little bit. Is he a shortstop? Is he a third baseman? Is he an outfielder? Maybe he can move to the outfield with his arm because scouts say that he has a good arm. But he's also he's not like a super fast guy. They said that his speed is good for his size, but he's not a base stealing threat. He's not a guy that you're going to put at the top of the order because of his speed. You'll put him at the top of the order because of his bat and his plate discipline. So I do kind of like this. I think that there's a very low chance that he falls. I think of the guys that we've talked about, because we talked about him, we talked about Irish, we talked about Seth Hernandez. I think it's more likely that Ike Irish is available and Arquette and Seth Hernandez are both already taken by the time that the Reds get there. But I know that as we move through the rest of this week, there's a couple of other guys that we'll talk about that could be there as well. But I think Aiva Arquette for me is best case scenario if he's still on the board.
And that is where we're going to go ahead and wrap up this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks, as always, for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure you check out Tim Daniel today after the Reds game on the Reds Postcast. He goes live after each game to break down what you just saw. Coming up on the next Locked On Reds, we are going to be talking about this Marlins series, and we better not be talking about them doing the most frustrating possible things, which would be them losing 2 games in a row to the Marlins. I'm going to lose my mind if that happens. Make sure you're here. Make sure you're subscribed. We're going to keep gathering up the news, the notes, the information, and the reports to keep you locked on Reds every single day. I love the pronunciation guide. Why have you not been doing that all along? That's
we're going to keep doing that moving forward. That way, you know, I think he might be the most toughest name to say, though, at least first name wise. So hopefully it gets easier from there.